I woke up thinking it was going to be an ordinary morning, the kind where the most exciting thing would be whether my coffee machine decided to explode or just beep angrily at me. Instead, my hollow terminal buzzed with a piercing alert, like the sound of 1,000 tiny lasers trying to negotiate a ceasefire in my skull. The message hovering above the console was stamped in royal violet and pulsed with the kind of authority reserved for intergalactic monarchs or my mother-in-law. Report concerning subject, human male, summon immediate, Queen Elithra. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and considered that maybe I had accidentally enrolled in some interstellar reality show. By the time I arrived at the palace, a sprawling construct that seemed to float on a cushion of pure energy, with corridors that rearranged themselves if you lingered too long, I realized I had no idea what humans were supposed to do when summoned by an alien queen. There were no how to survive interstellar royal summons pamphlets in the guidebooks. I half expected a bolt of light to vaporize me for being fashionably late, but the doors opened with a polite chime instead, as if the palace itself had a sense of humor. Inside, Elithra sat on her floating throne, a figure of elegance and authority, with ears long enough to brush the air currents like twin sails catching an invisible wind. She leaned over a holographic report that shimmered and rotated lazily above the floor, and the moment her gaze landed on me, her ears twitched sharply, almost like an antenna picking up an unexpected broadcast. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice deep and melodic, reverberating in a way that made gravity itself seem hesitant. I tried to muster authority, which mostly came out as a squeaky attempt at humor. "I assure you, Queen Elithra, I am mostly harmless. Some exaggeration might have occurred. Maybe." To my surprise, she tilted her head and the corner of her mouth curved in a shape suspiciously close to a smile. Her ears quivered, and I imagined they might sneeze glitter at any moment. The report hovered closer, and I could see the evidence of my so-called crimes in neon blue. I had wandered into a restricted armory, survived the security protocols without being disintegrated, and astonishingly, managed to make a few alien guards laugh while I did it. The final line, highlighted with what I assumed was royal judgment, read, "The subject exhibits unusual resilience and humor under pressure." Somehow, surviving a deadly armory with a sarcastic quip to a plasma turret had earned me a royal audience instead of a laser incineration. "Explain yourself," Elithra said, ears flicking with impatience. I swallowed. "Well, I was trying to locate the galactic mapping device." "Yes." And then there were buttons, many, many buttons, and the security system seemed temperamental. I panicked. I apologized. I may have made a joke about the gravity field. It was funny at the time. Her ears twitched again, and I noticed a slight upward bend that hinted at amusement, which was encouraging if your goal was not being vaporized. She raised an elegant hand, adorned with rings that seemed to orbit her fingers independently. "You humans are curious creatures, reckless, impulsive, and delightfully irritating." I chuckled nervously. "I'll take that as a compliment." She inclined her head, and the throne shifted slightly, rotating in a slow, hypnotic circle that gave her an almost casual air of floating omnipotence. "I summoned you," she continued, "because your report suggests qualities that are rare, even among humans. Ingenuity, reckless courage, and an odd sense of humor. I tried to imagine what kind of human behavior would earn interstellar praise, aside from negotiating with sentient nebulae or teaching a black hole to dance. "I am honored," I offered, hoping my uncertainty passed for modesty. Her ears twitched in what I assumed was approval. We began to talk, me stumbling over polite intergalactic speech protocols and her occasionally interjecting with stories of the court's absurdities. There had been an incident involving a sentient pudding being mistaken for an ambassador and nearly triggering a war, which she recounted with such dramatic flair that I snorted in spite of myself. Elithra's ears flicked, and I half expected them to wag like a dog's tail. It became immediately clear that diplomacy in this part of the galaxy involved as much humor as strategy, and my ability to laugh at ridiculous situations was apparently a valuable skill. Hours, or what I assumed were hours, though the palace's energy fields made time a fluid concept, passed as I navigated her questions. She inquired about Earth's strange habits, our obsession with tiny metallic boxes called cars, our inability to teleport without tripping over furniture, and our curious choice to eat peanut butter straight from the jar. I countered with questions about her court, the political implications of a floating throne, the utility of ears that could detect subatomic vibrations, and whether it was true that her palace once nearly declared war on dessert. Elithra laughed, a sound so melodic it seemed to alter the room's gravity, and for a moment I felt that maybe, just maybe, humans and aliens weren't entirely incompatible. By the end of the session, the initial tension had eased into something more subtle: curiosity, cautious amusement, and an unspoken agreement that I was no longer just a human trespasser. Elithra's ears twitched constantly, betraying both suspicion and delight, as she contemplated what to do with a human who could survive a high-security armory, make officers laugh, and somehow maintain composure in the face of advanced weaponry. I left the chamber with a mixture of relief and nervous excitement. The galaxy had suddenly grown a lot stranger, infinitely more humorous and inexplicably thrilling. Somewhere deep in the circuits of the palace, her laughter lingered, along with the faint glow of my own absurd survival story. I was now entangled in a cosmic game of trust, curiosity, and interstellar absurdity, where humor might matter just as much as courage, and long ears could reveal more than the sharpest censors. And as I walked away, trying to imagine the next summons without fainting, I realized the most dangerous thing in this encounter might not have been the weapons or the palace's shifting corridors. It might have been how much fun it was to make a queen laugh. I returned to the palace the next day, or at least I assumed it was the next day. Time in this sector of the galaxy seemed to enjoy practical jokes. The corridors now seemed to recognize me, shifting slightly as I passed, like they were nudging me along with invisible elbows. The guards gave polite nods, though I suspected they were silently betting on whether I would survive the meeting without accidentally initiating an interstellar incident. I had spent the night preparing a mental arsenal of human charm and wit, which mostly consisted of remembering to breathe and occasionally throwing in a bad joke. Queen Elithra was waiting, her long ears arched in a way that suggested both impatience and curiosity, and the throne floated just a little higher than yesterday, as if she had grown a few inches overnight. Or maybe it was the gravitational field adjusting to my presence. She gestured for me to sit on a hovering chair, which wobbled slightly before stabilizing, and I nearly toppled over trying to appear graceful. "Human," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice, "you continue to surprise my officers. They have started referring to you as the unintentional diplomat." I blinked. "I'm flattered, I think." Her ears twitched so hard I thought they might pick up a radio signal from Earth. We began talking, and I realized quickly that the purpose of this meeting was less about judgment and more about curiosity. Elithra wanted to understand humans, which meant asking deeply personal questions in between anecdotes about alien court mishaps. She asked me why humans drank coffee, a bitter, hot liquid designed to shock our nervous systems awake, and I explained, trying not to make it sound like a survival ritual. She laughed, a sound that seemed to bend the light in the room, and remarked that humans were a fascinatingly self-torturing species. In return, I asked about her long ears. "Do they always move like that?" She twitched them experimentally, and a faint spark of static danced between the tips. "They detect subatomic fluctuations and emotions simultaneously," she explained. "They also occasionally twitch when someone says something absurd, which seems frequent in your case." I laughed, imagining a world where my sarcasm could generate tiny sparks in an alien queen's ears. I'll try to keep my absurdity calibrated, I said. She tilted her head and the throne rotated slowly, like a celestial carousel, giving her ears an almost hypnotic rhythm. The conversation flowed into political matters, though even there, humor seeped in. Elithra told me about a recent diplomatic blunder where an ambassador from a gas planet attempted to deliver a gift of condensed methane ice, which exploded upon presentation. We now have an interplanetary ice cream shortage, she added, ears flicking in mock outrage. I couldn't resist a joke. Maybe you should send them a coupon for a frozen yogurt machine instead. She paused, considering the idea, then laughed. The sound resonated through the chamber like a low-frequency melody, and I realized that laughter might be one of the few things capable of bridging our species. She asked about Earth's politics, and I tried to explain without causing a galactic incident. We vote, I said. Sometimes wisely, sometimes less wisely. Mostly we just argue a lot and hope the right people survive the debates. Elithra's ears quivered. Fascinating. A species that governs through chaos and optimism, she mused. I nodded solemnly. It's the only system we've mastered so far. She scribbled a few notes on a floating crystal tablet, then laughed again. I can see why my officers find you amusing. You are absurd, yet remarkably resilient. Hours passed, filled with interspersed humor and philosophical musings. Elithra asked if humans ever feared the unknown. All the time, I said. Mostly when it involves taxes or accidentally entering highly restricted alien facilities. Her ears twitched sharply, and I thought I detected a hint of sympathy, or perhaps she was just trying not to laugh at my admission. She described moments when she herself had feared the unknown, such as navigating the politics of a council where members occasionally turned into gaseous forms when irritated. It's challenging, she admitted, but somehow necessary for survival. We then moved to discuss potential collaboration. She wanted to see how a human might contribute to her court, whether through diplomacy, problem-solving, or unintentionally causing comedic relief. I suggested something practical, like negotiating with sentient machinery or translating alien legal documents. She considered it, and then asked if I could improvise under pressure, a skill that apparently mattered more than academic credentials in her realm. I swallowed and nodded. I have a history of improvisation under mild chaos, I said, which was technically true, though I was hoping she didn't ask me to demonstrate by disarming a plasma cannon mid-laugh. Elithra's ears twitched rhythmically as she evaluated me, and I felt a strange sense of being measured not just for competence but for entertainment value. She asked me about humor, my capacity for it, my style, my willingness to joke even when situations were perilous. I explained that humans often use laughter to survive terrifying circumstances, a coping mechanism that involved both absurdity and courage. She leaned back, ears flaring in interest, and said, "Perhaps this is why you survived the armory. Humor, in your case, functions as both shield and sword." I grinned, imagining myself wielding sarcasm like a plasma blade. By the end of our session, I realized that the alien queen's curiosity about me had grown into something resembling genuine amusement. She seemed fascinated by the human capacity to improvise, to laugh at danger, and to find absurdity even in life-threatening situations. I had not only survived the armory but had somehow survived her attention with dignity intact, and possibly, just possibly, earned a place as her unusual advisor. As I left the chamber, the palace corridors seemed to hum in approval, or maybe it was just my imagination. I had entered thinking this meeting would be a trial, a test of my survival, and emerged with the knowledge that the Queen's interest was far more complex than simple judgment. Somewhere between the laughter, the subtle power plays, and the rhythmic twitching of her ears, a bond had begun, one based on curiosity, amusement, and the unpredictable nature of human resilience. And as I walked back to my quarters, I allowed myself a wry thought. If interstellar diplomacy required courage, wit, and the ability to make an alien queen chuckle, then I might just be better suited for this galaxy than I had ever believed. The adventure was just beginning, and somehow I had a feeling it would involve a lot more humor and a lot more ears than I had ever anticipated. By the time I returned to Queen Elithra's chamber for what I assumed might be my final evaluation, I had developed an odd sense of anticipation. The palace corridors seemed almost playful now, subtly shifting to guide me, and I had stopped panicking at every hovering surveillance orb, deciding instead that they probably just wanted to see me trip over my own feet again. Elithra sat on her throne, ears flicking with the rhythm of curiosity and faint amusement, and the report hovering above her shimmered, but this time with an unreadable glow, like it was holding back a punchline. "Human," she said, voice smooth yet commanding, "you have remained under observation for several cycles, and your performance has exceeded expectations." I nodded, trying to look dignified, though my shoulders tensed slightly. Exceeding expectations in alien diplomacy could mean anything from earning a medal to becoming an unintentional galactic weapon. I waited, heart in my throat. "Tell me," she continued, leaning forward slightly, "what have you learned about our universe?" Her long ears twitched in a way that made them look like intelligent antennae scanning for sincerity. I thought for a moment, then spoke. "That humor can survive anywhere. That bureaucracy exists in every corner of the galaxy. And that sometimes, even when faced with deadly weaponry or highly complicated alien protocols, a well-timed joke can be as powerful as any plasma cannon." Elithra's ears quivered in what I hoped was approval. She leaned back, spinning her floating throne slightly, giving the impression that the stars themselves were rotating to watch her evaluate me. "And yourself?" she asked. "What have you learned about yourself, human?" I swallowed and considered it carefully. "I've learned that courage isn't just about facing danger. It's about improvising, laughing when things go wrong, and finding ways to survive that even the rules didn't predict. I've learned that I can be resourceful in situations I never thought I could handle, and that sometimes a ridiculous approach is more effective than a sensible one." Elithra tilted her head, ears twitching rhythmically, and I noticed a faint spark of admiration in her gaze. We spent the next cycle recounting adventures I had inadvertently caused. The accidental armory incursion, my interactions with alien officers, and the intergalactic miscommunications that somehow ended in minor triumphs rather than catastrophe. Elithra laughed frequently, ears flicking like a metronome of amusement, and I began to notice that she valued not just my survival, but the way I had made the unpredictable universe more tolerable, less lethal, somehow funnier and more engaging. Finally, she gestured to a console, and a list of tasks and assignments materialized, ranging from negotiating with sentient starships to translating galactic legal codes that had a tendency to spontaneously combust if read incorrectly. "These are opportunities," she said, "for you to contribute to my court in ways humans rarely imagine. Some may be dangerous, some tedious, some absurd. You may laugh, you may fail, but you will learn." I nodded, feeling a curious blend of pride, terror, and excitement. Somehow, my life had gone from mundane Earth existence to interstellar unpredictability, and I found that I thrived on the chaos more than I feared it. She then offered an unexpected twist: an audience with her council, a group of alien leaders whose species ranged from gaseous forms to crystalline intelligences, and who could either destroy you with a thought or challenge you to a puzzle so convoluted it would make a Rubik's Cube feel trivial. I prepared myself with humor, deciding that if nothing else, making them laugh might be a survival strategy. Elithra's ears twitched as she observed me, clearly curious to see how a human might handle beings who operated on entirely different laws of logic and physics. When the council convened, I fumbled, stuttered, improvised, and somehow charmed beings who had previously been inscrutable. My jokes, awkward, human, and sometimes absurd, elicited glimmers of amusement even from a crystalline intelligence that usually communicated only in harmonic resonance. I realized in that moment that I had grown. My fear had transformed into confidence, my nervousness into adaptability, and my survival instincts had expanded to include creativity, humor, and empathy. I was no longer just a human reacting to alien circumstances. I was a participant, a contributor, an unintentional but effective diplomat. By the end of the session, Elithra smiled, the full expression, ears gently curved in delight. "You have changed," she said softly, almost contemplatively. "You understand that navigating the universe requires more than strength or intelligence. It requires curiosity, humor, and the willingness to embrace absurdity." I nodded, feeling a warmth I didn't expect from a queen whose species could read subatomic vibrations like open books. I had survived, yes, but more importantly, I had grown, transformed by a journey I had never sought but had now embraced. As I walked back through the palace, I reflected on the events that had brought me here. I had entered Elithra's court as an accidental trespasser, unprepared for the dangers and the strangeness of the alien realm. I had stumbled through deadly armories, navigated bizarre political systems, and survived trials that seemed designed to humiliate rather than challenge. But now, I emerged with confidence, insight, and a peculiar skill set: the ability to find humor in chaos, courage in absurdity, and connection in the most unlikely places. Elithra's laughter lingered in the corridors, a reminder that even in the vast, unknowable galaxy, there were moments of joy, understanding, and unexpected friendship. I understood now that the Queen's initial shock had evolved into fascination, and my role in her court would be defined not by strength or strategy alone, but by the very human qualities that had once seemed so ordinary. Courage, humor, and resilience. These were now my tools, my armor, and my path forward. When I finally reached my quarters, I allowed myself a small, private laugh, imagining the adventures ahead. The universe was wide, unpredictable, and often absurd, but I was ready. I had survived, I had learned, and most importantly, I had grown. Queen Elithra's initial surprise had given way to trust, and I had discovered the potential within myself to navigate challenges that were once unimaginable. And somewhere in the